Welcome everyone to this year's celebration event for the York Literary Review, the 2021 edition. Before we properly start, I'm going to do a few housekeeping notes. So you might have noticed at the bottom of your screen, there might be some subtitles or some closed captions. So that could be very helpful for some, but it might be off-putting. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a little more section with 3 dots, and there's an option to hide subtitles. Just if you find that off-putting, there's the option to turn it off. There's also got to let you know that this will be recorded. So at the end, we have a Q&A session. So if you don't want your name out on the recording, there's an option to turn it and say anonymous. And if you find you have any issues with anything, there is a raise hand function, and one of our team will come into the chat room and check that everything's okay technology-wise, because as you all know, technology is difficult. So now that's all out of the way. Hi everyone, and welcome to this year's event. We're so excited to share with you our anthology, and we hope that tonight's event will get you just as excited as we are. So tonight we're going to hear from Jamie Mcgarry, who is the publisher at Valley Press, who will be publishing this year's anthology, followed by some really exciting readings from a handful of authors that are featured this year's York Literary Review, as well as a short Q&A with each of our talented writers. We hope that this will be an exciting taster for the things to come. So if you are joining us this evening and would like to share your thoughts on the event on social media, either while you're watching or after, we ask that you use the hashtag YLR2021, just so we can see everything and like things and show everyone how much people are enjoying the anthology. So to start off tonight, we're going to have a few questions with Jamie Mcgarry. So Jamie is the publisher at Valley Press, and he published the previous 2018 edition of the York Literary Review. Hi Jamie, how are you today?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
So just a few questions to start off today's event. So how do you think this year's edition of the York Literary Review differs from the 2018 edition, if you think it does differ at all?
Yeah, well, with this question, I feel like if I say nice things now, it will be at the expense of the last edition. You know, I say, oh, it's so great, and people go, wait a minute, is that different from last time? But with that in mind, I would say that it definitely feels more hands-on. It feels more like it belongs to the students this year, and as you'll perhaps talk about later. And also I think the stories are more sort of reader-friendly. Some of it really in the last edition, it really owned the word literary, and it was just like when you really have your right, concentrate now and get bring back my degree and so on to appreciate it. But this one is really it's really just a good read, and I would recommend it to anyone. I would say it's entertaining from cover to cover, which it's not like it's not standard for a literary journal. I would say that, but this one is and hopefully that will continue. Hopefully you've laid down the template for future editions.
That would be we would like to think that would be a really nice way for us to walk away and think,
yeah, it's like it could always be a beach read, like you can relax and enjoy the writing, and it's
that's a really good way of putting it. I like that. Something you could just pick up, have a read, come back to it, and something that isn't going to be daunting to approach either.
Yeah, so, but the quality is very high as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. We read through over 470 submissions, and we found like the very best out of all of those. So how do you feel the events of this past year have influenced the writing being produced in particular in this publication, or do you think there's been any influence, or do you think people have not cared about the pandemic? Do you think they have?
Well, it's hard to. This is a difficult question. I was saying before we went live that I haven't got a good answer for this. It's hard to know because you set this theme, which was time and memory, and it's hard to know how that affected the writing and how, because you kind of anticipated it. If people were more inclined to look backwards or think about the past thing entirely differently because of the events of the past year, then we'll never know, because you pushed them in that direction anyway with the theme, which is very appropriate, and I liked that. I like that spin on, which people can read about in the preface about how they came up with it. Yeah, but in terms of the wider writing, I think that people are either there's three types of, we have submissions as well at Valley Press. There's three types of ways of responding. The first one is write what you're going to write what you're interested in anyway, pretend there's nothing going on. Number two, write something deliberately in the opposite direction, something very cheery and maybe a bit silly, and just to really sort of as a contrast. And the third one is to write something like, and dive into it with 2 feet and say, these are my pandemic sweats, these are my COVID diary. And a lot of people have found it very helpful to write. I think maybe it's mentioned in one of the stories or the essays in here that they felt necessary to write, so they can look back and have a record of what it was like being alive in the pandemic, and they felt like guilty if they didn't write. I definitely read that somewhere this week.
I think it's definitely on our end, and the pieces we chose, although not all of them are about the pandemic, a lot of them are about completely different things. You can tell there is a shift in the way people approach time and memory now, whether or not they're actually talking about that in particular. So, next question. What have you enjoyed about publishing and ultimately helping to revive the York Literary Review last year? Because some people might not know, but the last edition was in 2018. So it's been quiet for a few years. And how have you felt about taking part in bringing it back to life, and especially working with the new MA publishing cohort at York St John?
Yeah, well, I definitely feel like, and again, not at the expense of last edition, but I've definitely enjoyed this one more. And it is because of the, York St John is more set up towards publishing and the teaching of publishing now than it was before. And that is, and hopefully continue in that direction. But yeah, there's been more of an effort to engage with the smaller parts of publishing beyond editing. So particularly yourself with the design and the it's been great to work with I always enjoy working with the students, but it's been great to work with the students on a higher level than undergraduate students who really can put together a top quality literary journal. And they're only perhaps a few months away from being legitimate publishers with jobs. Fingers crossed. So it's been like having extra members of staff, really, I suppose, or freelance anyway. But so I think that is that the answer? I forgot the question now, but I feel that was
that you've enjoyed working with it and bringing it back to life, and especially with working with the students, because you've been a great help. For the audience, Jamie was the one who taught the York Lit Review team how to actually typeset. We all went into this complete beginners, never having looked at how on earth to do it. And Jamie came in, solid 2-hour session of this is how to do it. And we shook that and ran with it. So
yeah, I enjoyed that as well.
It was great. It was such a great help for us, and just not only as to be as like in a publishing MA, but just to be in a more, not so much grown-up setting, but a higher level of understanding how books are made and the level of detail that has to go into it.
Yeah, I think Rob's done a good job knowing how closely to connect Valley Press with the student team, and not taking on too much himself, and letting you do your thing and me do my thing, and him just being a very light touch to facilitate it. That's been I've been very impressed by that as well.
Well, thank you for answering all of our questions. So we're about to move on to the next section. So thank you, Jamie. I've seen that he's disappeared off the screen, so that is a prompt to me to give you a proper introduction of the anthology. So as we were talking about before about the theme of time and memory, so when thinking of a theme for this year's edition of the review, we knew we couldn't ignore the global circumstances but we really didn't want to focus solely on the negatives of, feelings of sadness and just loss. We wanted to show a broader perspective of what these experiences could do to a writer. So this led to this year's theme of time and memory. So we hope that would encourage people to reflect on past experiences and look forward to the future. An idea of considering where we've come from and then where we will go. So from this, we've received everything from stories of fishing in the River Ouse to a query on the changing of self over a time in a bar in Germany. And most of the writing that was submitted was hugely positive and was so refreshing to read. It wasn't the same thing and the same topic over and over again. It was completely amazing stuff we were reading. And as I said before, 474 submissions we received. And every single one, we wished we could have put all of them in an anthology, but unfortunately we only had room for 32. So the variety of the pieces that we have in the final anthology has resulted in a wonderfully eclectic anthology that we are certain will intrigue and interest everyone who's going to read it. And very excitingly, pre-orders are now available exclusively through the Valley Press website, and the link to that should come on the chat. If not, we'll be posting it all over our social media. You'll probably not be able to scroll on Twitter without seeing us post about it. And then you'll actually be able to buy the anthology in early August. And having said that, we hope you enjoy the rest of tonight's event. And I'm going to hand over to my co-host Amy to introduce our first reader of the night. So hopefully that should.
Hi, so our first reading was actually the first piece that we had submitted to the York Literary Review this year. And it's set in our very own city of York, and it's a tale about treasures found fishing in the River Ouse. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the author, Joseph Darlington, isn't able to make it tonight. However, in his place, we'd like to introduce Dr. Rob O'Connor reading Joseph's piece, Fishing for Iron.
Hi, everybody. Just to check, Amy, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I'll try and do this justice, everybody. Like I say, a bit last minute, so forgive me if I stumble over a few words. But this is the short story, Fishing for Iron by Joseph Darlington. My father died outside, out in the rain. We dragged him out there in his bed, the whole family together. I remember I was down by his feet. Tony was up by his head, being the eldest, and Mum, her belly swollen and angry even then, heaved on one side, Katie on the other. Thinking about it, perhaps he died on his way outside. Maybe he died as we jostled him through the caravan, knocking over lamps and stepping on the cat. Maybe when we squashed him against the doorframe. He had asked to be taken outside. He wanted to die outside. That's why we were taking him out there. If he gave up and died on the way out, then that was his prerogative, I suppose. All the neighbours gathered around. What's he doing out here? I remember Sandra asking. He asked for it, Mum replied. The nosy beggars gathered round. It was the closest thing the sight had seen to entertainment since the police caught up with Ray Conno, the bare knuckle king. They all gathered round and smoked and watched. Whether Dad had this in mind, I'll never know. I was only young then, 14. Katie was younger. Tony, thinking about it, couldn't have been much older than 16 or 17. But then he worked out and he'd just married Esmeralda 6 months before that. And so he was on his way to being a dad himself. Those things made him seem older to me, like he was up there with my dad too, an adult. I remember all the toasts that happened once we were sure he was dead. I remembered the wailing and the moaning. Then, after a half hour or so of sitting in the drizzle, someone or other broke out the moonshine and we started the funeral party right then and there. We were all soaked through, of course, but that brought us closer to him. We were all bedraggled, our hair dripping on our foreheads. Whiskey warm in the throat passed around like medicine. He'd had enough of it while he was dying. Mum, I think, dragged out his half-finished bottle and said, "Here's to my old man," and we polished that one off and all. I'm not one for celebrating a death. I went and sat inside. I surrounded myself with all the odds and sods we'd picked up over the years of dredging. Fishing for iron, Dad used to say whenever anyone came up and asked what we were doing. Interesting, they'd nod and walk on. We went into town. The fishing was better there. The townies made a habit of throwing things in on a Friday night, and had done so for a good 1,000 years before our magnets came along. We'd find a place somewhere clear of gawpers and cast out our magnets into the muddy mystery of the ooze. There was nothing sophisticated about it. Dad had picked the magnets up from some Roma he'd met at Appleby, traded them for something, I'm not sure what. Dad never had that many skills. Anything he could do seemed to come natural to every man on the site, which left his talents surplus to requirements. However he got the magnets, he soon had the idea of tying them to rope and casting them into the canal. That's where it started, you see, the canal just beside the site. He threw them in, plop, the sound of a wet swallow, a big throaty gulp, and then he'd wait a few seconds, letting them get to the bottom, sink into the mud down there, and then he'd drag them in. After half an hour, he'd already recovered the Farley's old bike, a shopping trolley, 2 or 3 old fishing rods, and a badge with an official insignia on it that might have meant something to somebody once. Dad took the things back to their owners. He got a hearty thanks from them, and even a couple of quid from the Farleys. I figure that's what gave him the bug. After he died, I sat in the caravan and I looked around at all the mangled old bits of rust that we'd gathered. Things so old and rotten that it was hard to imagine they'd once been objects made by men. Possessions sitting proudly in people's houses. They were more like weird creatures now, warped by the fairies and turned to stone. I can't remember when he started bringing them home. It wasn't until later, I don't think. It might have been after the cough started. Maybe he was hoarding things, something to pass on to us, or maybe he sympathized with them. The strange broken down masses of iron, once useful but now rotten, bent, unrecognizable. Or maybe he just liked them from the start, I don't know. He never said. Anyway, the caravan was full of them by the end. I sat in between them and looked at them, and I remembered all the things we used to catch. We'd find a place there on the banks of the Ouse, right in the middle of York. We'd all be there, me and Dad, Katie and Tony. Little Baron was there even before he was born, kicking away in Mum's belly as she cast in the magnets. You won't know Baron. He died when he was born. We'd cast in the magnets and hear the plop and let them sink to the bottom. That was the most exciting part for me. I remember Tony would get excited when he was dragging it in. He couldn't wait to see what was on the end. Sometimes he'd feel something big and he'd get so excited that he'd pull too hard and lose it. Dozy bugger, Dad would call him. But I was excited when it plopped, then waiting for it to sink down. I imagined it down there in the deep, blind, heavy, searching out metal. Then when you were sure it was on the bottom, you'd start pulling it in. This is why it's called dredging, but it isn't dredging really. Dredging is what the big boats do down on the fens near King's Lynn in the east. We went down there to visit cousins once. I saw a dredger. What we do isn't that. Dad was right, I think. We were fishing for iron. It was the same as any fisherman, really. You pull it in slowly, slowly, not wanting to lose it after you've got a bite. Then wallop, it's out of the water. You weigh it and you price it and either you throw it back or you keep it. It was Dad who made those decisions. We'd pass the catch to him and he'd hold it in his work hands, his work gloves. He'd hold it up to his beady eye and turn it around like this. Sometimes he'd rub a bit of muck off it or bite it to see how soft it was. Then after a couple of seconds, he'd know its value. I think it's only near the end where we started keeping it for ourselves. And it was never anything valuable we kept, only the stuff no one else could find a use for. Only the monsters. I remember sitting among those strange little monsters while the party went on outside. Dad was dead and gone and back with the ancestors. These were what he left behind. Of all the things to leave, these were it, his legacy. It could have been the keys we found, ancient things that were meant for unlocking even more ancient secrets. It could have been the fine candelabras or the jewelry, but no, it was these. whatever they were. I don't think there's a word for them. Monsters is perhaps too harsh. Stuff is too vague. Maybe there's a word in some other language. Who knows? I don't know. We threw them all out anyway, all those strange things. We chucked them before his body had even gone into the ground. I suppose they never did mean anything either way. And Dad was not a man of great mystery, a simple man really. He liked being with family and he liked being outside. He got both in the end, and now he's in his grave. I still go fishing for iron sometimes, but I never catch anything, not like we used to. Now it's all just rubbish. It's calming though, especially in the drizzle. It's good for reflecting there with the water and the muck. It's a good place to remember him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That was really well read. And you can read Joseph's piece alongside all of our other amazing contributions if you pre-order the anthology on the Valley Press website. So with that, I'll hand you back to Celine to introduce our second reader.
Right. So we'd now like to introduce Beth Kilkenny reading an extract from her piece titled Was I There? Memories, Lies and Half-Truths. This piece is a non-fiction experimental piece of writing regarding memories that immediately grabbed our attention. So Beth, whenever you're ready and whenever your camera comes on, we're excited to hear you read a section. Perfect.
Hey, Celine, thanks very much for that. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. I'll get started then. Thanks very much to the team for publishing my piece and for inviting me to read this evening. So as Celine said, I'm going to read an extract from my essay, Was I There? Memories, Lies and Half-Truths. My mother told the same stories over and over. If you added them up, there were only about 2 hours of her life that she wanted me to know about. The Wonder Spot, Melissa Bank. Things I remember, true or false. 1. Being hunted by a stray dog on Bocas del Toro whilst in an anti-malarial drug-induced hallucinogenic state. 2. Walking the streets of our grey satellite town in my best rah-rah skirt, clasping a present for a party to which I did not want to go. It was a bottle of peach bubble bath purchased in the local supermarket. 3. Arriving into Amsterdam by ferry. 4. Nothing. 5. One scene from the movie version of The Hours by Michael Cunningham in which Nicole Kidman played Virginia Woolf. 6. The registration number of the car belonging to the boy I used to trace the streets looking for, J419FNP. 7. Half-heartedly sticking my fingers down my throat. 8. Phones alive with bad news. 9. Myself. 10. A particularly delicious plate of ravioli in a restaurant off a side street in Rome. 7. Half-heartedly sticking my fingers down my throat. Scars are your body's mementos. The scar on my chin from when I split it open on the side of a swimming pool in France as a child. For some reason, immediately after the event, I propagated 2 tales of how it happened, and now I can't recall the lie from the truth. The scar on my thumb from when I cut it opening a stubborn tin of corned beef. Corned beef. That tells you things, doesn't it? The scar just above the knuckle on the index finger of my right hand from where I got warts frozen off when I was a child. My mother would pick me up from school early to go to the hospital, and on the way home I'd get a sausage roll. I remember this time with warmth, despite the liquid nitrogen. The scar on the cheekbone below my left eye. At a boyfriend's house, lying on his bed, he opened the window and the speaker fell off the ledge onto my face. There was rather a lot of blood. He was my first love. The scar that I never look at, never touch, but know was there from when I was cut open to make way for my firstborn, whose descent was rapid and urgent. That's not a lot of scars, I suppose, for a life. Does my body hold its own memories? Is it hiding scars from me? Does it remember the shame I felt about it? Does it forgive me for the times I ineffectively and with a certain lack of commitment put my fingers down my throat. 9. Myself. I no longer value this kind of memento. I no longer want reminders of what was. They only serve to make it clear how inadequately I appreciated the moment when it was here. Blue Nights, Joan Didion. I like to throw things out. I find it hard to be calm amongst clutter. I'm 41 years old, and anything of personal value to me is contained within one banker's box. I look through the box whenever I'm trying to find an important document I've temporarily misplaced, a birth certificate, a passport. But I shouldn't be looking there, the banker's box. The box is for memories, not life administration. But I look in the box, knowing the thing I want is not there, and in my hurried, frustrated state, find things I've hidden because I don't want to remember. A photo with an ex-boyfriend at the top of the Empire State Building. Sometimes you look at photos of yourself from 10 years ago and think, I have no idea who you are. One of the reasons I know I'm a terrible mother is because I keep very few mementos from my children's early years. It's more important to me that my home be tidy than that I keep mementos for them to look back on as adults. I don't recognize clutter as a form of memory, but I can see now that it is. My children have their own banker's boxes. They contain mostly a handful of drawings, finger paintings from creche or school, some first birthday cards. I didn't keep their baby teeth. I didn't keep a journal of their notable firsts, first word, first step, first haircut. I have no idea what either of their first words were. As it happens, I do remember my second born's first steps because they were on Boxing Day, or maybe Christmas Day, one of those days anyway. I don't recall my eldest first steps. Would I have remembered if I'd kept a journal? Is writing it down the same as remembering, or is that cheating? During the pandemic, I keep a journal. It's now 9 months later, and I'm still keeping it, which is the longest I've ever kept a journal. I started it because I knew otherwise I'd never remember how it felt to be alive during a pandemic. I don't want to have lived through a century's defining event and not remember it. I don't want to ask in years to come, was I there? Thank you. That's the end of my extract.
That was great. Thank you, Beth. So I just have a few questions about your piece, if you don't mind. So
No.
First question. We absolutely loved the experimental and contemporary style of your piece. It was something that made us go back and read it over and over again. We kept revisiting in it and it really stuck in our minds. So what was it in particular that made you want to write it this way?
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely comment. I don't know, to be honest. I suppose I had just, to be honest about it, I suppose I had done a course recently on kind of learning how to write more experimentally. So it was kind of maybe a little bit fresh in my mind. And I suppose you're aware that maybe I had these kind of stories that I wanted to tell, these memories that I was playing over and over in my mind, and what was going to be the best way to kind of string them together, in that they weren't really in any way connected, but kind of putting them together as a list like that at the beginning was maybe kind of a connecting theme for them.
Yeah, and we think that's worked so well. If people do get the anthology, you'll be able to see the way that it's laid out. There is a list at the beginning, and then Beth goes into each section and explains it. That was only just a wonderful little section. There's so much more to the piece as a whole. And following on from that, how do you feel that your memories and experiences of time over the past year have impacted your writing? And do you think that will impact your writing in the future?
I think when we were talking earlier about the pandemic and how it, how did it show in people's writing? I suppose when I've been writing over the last year, you're really torn between wanting to write about the pandemic and then thinking, oh, people don't want to read about this because everybody's sick of it. But I think you can't help but kind of, it seems to crop up a mention of it in almost everything I'm writing now. And I suppose I've definitely written much more in the last year than I ever had done before, maybe because I had a bit more time to sit around and think about things. So it's definitely impacted in that way. Yeah.
Definitely, that time has changed very drastically in all of our lives, and clearly it's impacted the way, not only what you've written, but giving you that time to actually sit down and get all of these thoughts out on a piece of paper. Was there anything
And I suppose you're just
No, you go ahead.
Sorry, go on. No,
you go
sorry,
ahead.
go on. You go on.
Oh, I just
Actually, it's fine.
any reason in particular that drew you to submitting to the York Lit Review?
Well, I'm in Ireland at the moment, but I'm from Newcastle originally. So I have very fond memories of visiting York. So and obviously any kind of northern connection, I'm very keen to hang on to, despite having not lived in England for a while. And I had also I know there's following a few kind of literary blogs on Twitter and stuff. I had seen people kind of recommending it and whatnot, so I thought I'd give it a go, and I was absolutely delighted to get the notice that I was going to be
so happy to hear that. And especially with you mentioning about the northern connection, that was something we really wanted to highlight in this year's anthology. So although we've got writers from all over the world, we really wanted to make sure that northern writers or people who had a connection to the north did get not so much, but just a bit more of a platform, because we really feel like northern writing, or writing that's not typically noticed by general publishing, we really wanted to give it an opportunity in the York Lit Review. So hopefully we've achieved that.
And it's funny that I suppose that's another thing that the pandemic has made me think about, is just I've been thinking about Newcastle and home and England so much more, because I haven't been able to get home. So it's definitely featuring more in my writing as well.
I completely understand that. But with that, I'll say thank you for answering all these questions and for reading once again. Huge encouragement to any readers. You absolutely have to check out the York Lit Review to see this piece of writing. It's fantastic. And with that, I will hand over to Amy to introduce our third reader of the night.
So our next reader is Victoria Gatehouse. I was the first person to read and edit her poem, and I immediately loved her unique take on our theme of time and memory. So with that, I'll introduce you to Victoria reading her poem, Passports.
Hi everybody, can you see and hear me okay? So it's great to be here at this celebratory event, and I do feel really honoured to have a poem included, especially when I've heard how many submissions you've had. I'm also a northern writer, so that provides a link to the previous reader. And I also felt when Beth was reading, it was a stunning reading, but there were also some other links that linked our readings together. I also kept keeping a COVID journal. Beth, I also remember having a rah-rah skirt. And the other thing is Beth actually mentioned passports in her reading. And this poem was inspired by having a passport renewed, which I completely understand in the time of COVID. It's really not top of your priority list. However, my passport expired, and it was a quiet time, so I thought I would renew it. And it was the very first time that I'd actually renewed a passport online. And anybody who's renewed online, there are loads and loads of rules that you have to stick to. And we ended up having to take all pictures off the wall, make sure there were no shadows on my face. And it took me back to all those passport photos I've had taken in the past. And because you only have it done every 10 years, it's sort of quite an event, and your sort of face, your expression is sort of frozen for 10 years of your life. So that made me think about times past, which sort of fitted in with the theme of this anthology. So here's the poem, Passports. My back is against the landing wall as you lift your phone and reel off the rules. No objects in the background, no shadows, plain expression, mouth closed. Looking straight ahead, I'm scrolling back through the booths of the past. How my deadpan face, carried across borders in the pockets of rucksacks, scanned by security and airline crew, has altered so little and so much from that first photograph in Woolworths, where I swiveled the chair too high and then too low, fumbled for the right change. Another slick of Rimmel's frosted rose as I waited for the flash, for my image to spew forth in 4 sticky squares, gingerly extracted by finger and thumb, snipped out, posted off, to be returned plastic glazed, ageless for a decade. I'm wondering now how many renewals I might have left, how many to be added to the stash with their corners erased. Please, 10 years from now, you'll still be keeping the shadows from my face. Thank you.
Hi. That was really well read, thank you. I loved your poem. It was one of the first poems I got to read because I was predominantly editing fiction, and I just fell in love with it. And when we were recommending poems to be put in the anthology, I was rooting for it because I was I thought it was a really interesting idea. So it was really, really good. I was wondering if there was anything in particular that drew you to submit to the anthology this year.
I mean, I too am a northerner, and I live in West Yorkshire, but I was born in Leeds, so I've spent a lot of time in York, and it's a place that I'm familiar with, and I've also done a couple of poetry readings in York. I've read at York Library as well. So when I know that as a northerner, sometimes you're drawn to northern publications and other northern voices. Perhaps more than I would be to maybe a London publication. So I think that was part of the reason that I wanted to submit, and that I'd heard really good things as well about the York Literary Review. Yeah, well, as Celine said, one of our aims was to highlight Northern talent as well as other people, but predominantly Northern talent, and we really wanted to help add to that community of growing independent Northern publishing. And yeah, so that's really nice to hear. I know you said that you were inspired by your online renewal of your passport. So I was wondering if you have what your opinions are on the growing online nature of everything going online, and the impact of that on the writing and publishing experience. Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, for me, I'm used to doing readings sort of face to face in front of an audience. And also I'm a member of different poetry groups where we used to meet up in the pub once a month and workshop poems, and we've all had to adapt and do virtual workshopping, virtual readings. But I think it's great that we're able to do that because it keeps poetry alive and it allows people to connect. And I know for a lot of people it's been a really big lifeline to attend events like this. And I've certainly got workshopping groups with local poets that I work with where we meet on Zoom and share poems and give feedback. And it's been really important for us all. So although you can't deny having that chemistry with the audience in a face-to-face event, you can't beat it. But I think it's a really good thing that we've been able to all connect in this way. And it's sort of been the learning for us, really, hasn't it, to get used to using these types of platforms. But it stopped us feeling isolated, I think, during isolation. So I think it's a good thing. And actually, I've been to events where you get a really, really good turnout. I think sometimes when people have to make the effort to drive somewhere or get the bus or the train, you don't always get the audience that you get with a virtual platform. So yeah, it's good that we've adapted in this way, but I am looking forward to doing a live reading at some point in the future. Yeah, I know all the online stuff has been quite daunting for a lot of people, but I think, like you said, it's been a really good opportunity for people to connect, particularly this past year.
I mean, I've attended so
Definitely.
many online events, but I know for a fact if they were in person, I probably wouldn't have been able to attend, just
Me too.
it's like being in London or whatever. A lot of the events are often held down south. So yeah, it's been a really good opportunity for publishing and writing.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've evented, you know, sort of attended events in London that I just wouldn't have been able. Just it's a financial side of it as well, isn't it? Paying to get down there. So yeah.
Yeah, there's been a whole host of free events this year that have been absolutely brilliant. So it's been really good free online events.
Yeah, definitely.
So we asked Beth this as well, but how do you feel that your like memories and experience of the past year are going to impact on your writing in the future?
There's a definite impact. I mean, I do keep I keep this journal called I call it the COVID Chronicles, and I have been writing about it, and part of it is just a bit cathartic, isn't it, getting it out there. But I also realised that a lot of magazines are saying no more COVID poems. We've had enough. But I think some of them you sort of write for yourself. But it has impacted the way that we live. You know, future generations. My kids are really impacted with their schooling. I mean, I say to my kids, you're living through history, living through this, and I think I'm really glad that I'm writing it all down, and I do think more poems will come from it. So yeah, I can't deny that I've written more and I've written about COVID, but there are some times that I just want to write about other stuff as well, because we can get it, you know, it's such well, we're all going through a collective experience, aren't we? But sometimes it can be really comforting to read about people having the same experiences that you're having, I think.
Yeah, well, obviously we said we didn't want to focus solely on the pandemic, but we were very much aware, and I think Celine spoke about this at the beginning, that like we knew everything was going to ultimately be influenced by it. We didn't expect to get any writing in that wasn't influenced by it in some way. But yeah, I think it's undoubtedly going to impact everything going forward. But we're hoping that can be like spun in a positive light as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for answering our questions, and I'll pass back to Celine to introduce our next reader.
Right. So just before I introduce our next reader, a quick mention that we do have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. It should be 2 little speech bubbles and it'll say Q&A. We encourage you to send in any questions you like to either us, the team who've worked on the York Lit Review, or any of our readers from tonight. Just any queries you have. Lily will be monitoring them and we'll be talking about them at the end. So it's a great chance to get your questions in now, or rather than at the end panicking, thinking, oh God, I don't have a question, oh, there's no time. It's just a good time to get some questions in now while we're about to listen to our 4th reader, which will be Sarah Davey. So this piece was one of the shorter fiction pieces that we received, and we particularly enjoyed it for the fact that it told such a beautiful and captivating story in a short space of time. And it utilizes a wonderful combination of like the melancholy but in a naturistic landscape, and it's called On Hawthorne Ridge, and it's a fantastic piece of writing. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much for the introduction. Can I just check you can hear me okay? Is that all right? Hope so. I'm not normally this bright red, but Zoom makes me look this red, so I'm so sorry. I'm really looking forward to reading, and it's been lovely hearing everyone's work so far. So this is, although it's a short piece, it was a bit long for tonight, so this is an extract from my piece on Hawthorne Ridge. The bus dropped me where I expected. As it pulled away, clouds rolled in and huge drops of rain erupted on the ground around me. The cars that had gathered in the lane slowly disappeared, some walkers turning without leaving the safety of the vehicle. Others drank from flasks and wiped condensation from the inside window to glimpse the view. I peered through the rain caught in my glasses. I knew where the hawthorn was, but its gnarled form was clouded in mist. This was a walk I had done almost 20 times. My feet would find their way and my body would follow. Half an hour in and the rain was filling divots in the earth made by grazing cattle. Every stone lining the way was slick. My feet and legs became disconnected from my brain, taking me left, then right, until I stopped and realised I was surrounded. Not by open moor and sky, but by cows, newly turned out with their calves. Steam rose from their nostrils, and one was so close I felt her hot breath on the back of my neck. The track traced the edges of their grazing land, and if you stayed on it, they left you to your travels. The weather had driven me off course. I could not see the edges of the herd, but felt them stretch out in front of me, filling every possible way out. My mind raced to find the file on escaping protective mothers who could trample you to death in a heartbeat. I recalled your lesson. They can move faster than you. Do not make eye contact. If you have a dog, let it go. It can outrun them. The rain broke, and to my left, the loose path to the ridge was picked out by a tiny fleck of sun. I dropped my eyes, stretched my arms out by my sides to make myself as big as possible, and moved forward carefully. I bumped face first into the dense coat of a brown and white speckled mother. She stayed still. I edged along her, using her heaving girth as my guide. They followed me with their eyes, their heads turning slowly. The sound of grass moving around their mouths and into their gaping stomachs was only slightly louder than my thumping heart. My right hand brushed the tiny damp snout of a calf, and I stifled a squeal when I saw it. Bright orange and fluff covered like an orangutan. One of the highlands. Two more cows and I was past the herd, the sharp stones that mark out the way under my feet. I lifted my eyes but did not look back until I was sure their interest in me had waned. The rain disappeared and clouds were lifting. 30-odd heads bowed to the ground. 30-odd heads bowed to the ground in daily prayer. I turned and ran. Thank you. That's the end of that. Sorry for my little cough.
That was great. And do not worry about coughing at all. That was an absolutely fantastic reading. And the piece as a whole itself is absolutely amazing. So just a few questions for you. So was there anything in particular that inspired you to write this?
Well, I've got a terrible confession, is that I didn't originally write it to send into the York Literary Review. I know, but this is writing life, so it's quite useful.
Yes.
So it was originally written to send into something that was meant to be inspired by food. And when you read the whole story, it is based around a cheese and pickle sandwich. And I wrote the story and sent it off, and it didn't get accepted. And I really, really loved the story and really wanted somewhere to send it. So I did a bit more work on it. And talked a bit more about the environment and the place, and a little bit more about the relationship of the person in the story and the person that was missing. And then I'm Northern, so I'll send anything with a Northern link, I'll send my work into. So yeah, but that's my terrible confession. But in writing life, quite often, if a piece of work doesn't go somewhere, it doesn't mean it's bad or that it's not right. It just means you haven't found the right place for it. So thank you.
Absolutely. And that's something that we really tried to emphasize to everyone who submitted, that there wasn't a bad piece of writing we received at all. It was always just a case of, we don't have the pages to put them on. But as you're saying, that in the piece here, there's a person that's there and there's the person that's missing. So in times as we're in, there's a lot of talk about loss, almost as if it's like an unspeakable truth. So do you feel like it's important to talk about loss in the way that you have?
I think so. And like a lot of people, I haven't really written anything COVID related. I haven't kept a journal. I've found myself really struggling to write. I've written one piece about going to a dentist in COVID, but that's all. And I think the way it's a bit peculiar, but we lost our dog at the beginning of lockdown, and the way I processed that grief was quite different. It was quite new, and it was quite strange experiencing it in this time. But just everything that was going on around us made me reflect on what I kind of have and what I might hang on to if I didn't have someone. It's been hard not to think about what would happen if you lost the people closest to you, because it's been so out of our control. So I think I thought a lot about that, and I was trying to focus quite a lot on the things that I enjoyed and that I loved about the people around me. And that's kind of what I hope the story is about, is mourning, but mourning in a way that celebrates somebody who's not who's gone.
And I think it's that aspect that really made your piece stand out to us, because in the beginning we were so set on, we don't want it to be, a negative piece. We don't want to talk anthology, we don't want to talk about death, we want to keep it, or loss, we want to keep it positive, we want people to be happy reading it. But when we read your piece, it completely changed our perspective, and we realized it doesn't have to be so heartbreakingly sad to read a piece that talks about loss. It can give you a different kind of feeling of maybe like nostalgia or happiness, even like remembering the good times or what once was, and although it's not happening now, it did happen, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned before, talking about Northern connections, so how do you feel about Northern writing starting to make waves in the publishing world?
Well, I love it. I also run the Northern Writers Studio, so I'm completely 100% invested. And I'd been telling everyone who comes to my sessions to send something into this, and then I realised, why have I not sent something into it? Like, I'm Northern too, and I'm super proud Northerner. I live in Northumberland now, but I'm from Durham, where people from the northeast can probably tell where I'm from by my accent. But I'm really excited about it. There's still a lot of work to do. There's work not just around people being Northern, but about our own class and expectations as well. And I think there's noises being made, but I definitely want to see more work from sort of the big publishers. But this is why this kind of thing's brilliant. Sort of the smaller indie publishers are putting a lot more weight behind supporting people regionally. And that's what I love about this publication and the work that Valley Press and people like them do.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm from Northumberland. We probably can't tell from, like, I think
it's there.
It's there. Just a sprinkle. I completely understand that feeling of, I don't want to move to London. I don't want to be in the London publishing scene. There's perfectly good writing up in the north. It just needs more platforms for it to be stood upon and people can see it.
Yeah.
Because there's some real good stuff out there, and we're glad to put, for example, yours on our little pedestal as well. But with that, I'll say thank you for your fantastic reading and for your great answers. And I'm going to pass over to Amy to introduce our final reader.
So our final reader, Indy Watson, is a member of our very own York St John community, and interestingly submitted the only piece of writing that we didn't have a single editorial suggestion for. We hope that you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoyed reading it, and I'd like to introduce you to Indy reading her poem Whalebones.
Hiya, so another Northern writer along with most of everyone else, and it's been really nice to be reading with everyone else because they're very talented, and I'm excited to read what everyone else has submitted. So this is Whalebones. Seagulls bow to the whalebones of Whitby, their cries curling round ivory bone in blissful harmony, a crowd singing their gratitude for the bed of blue. I was small, too small to paddle into the murky depths, lest my little body sink far below the surface, and the waves wash away the memory of me. So I settled for rock pools. Soon I grew taller, and the sea sang out her lullabies, sweet in the summer air. I drew nearer, and the horizon distorted, thick with sea salt and forgotten days. Her rippling waves retreated as she inhaled, to uncover a collation of treasures, sea glass and shells carved deep into the sand. I inhaled to uncover my longing for her deep waters. She sings to me now, each note lingering in the air, an echo of her melodic past, her tune fading into obscurity across her infinite shores. I run along peppering sand and jagged pebbles, my doubts sprinkled along the shoreline like bread for the ducks, as the sea whisks them far away from here. She washes away the memory of my troubles, painting them into her horizon as I look on from the whalebones of Whitby. Thank you. A short one to end.
Hi.
Hello.
So we all loved your piece. Like I said, we didn't have any editorial suggestions for it. It was just great, and we thought it was just so interesting, like the writing and like even the way it was structured, like on the page. It was just really interesting. So was there a particular memory or like a time that inspired the piece?
So I've been going to Whitby for most of my childhood holidays, like my whole life. So when I think of nostalgia and memory, that is the main thing that I think about. And I don't think I'd ever actually written any poetry about Whitby specifically. So when I saw the theme as well was time and memory, and because I've been going to Whitby like all my life, I thought it'd be interesting to approach it from an angle of how has my memory of it changed from being there as a kid to a teenager to going there now. So I kind of decided that's what I wanted my viewpoint to be with this poem.
That's really interesting, actually. I think like Celine read out like our like kind of aims for the anthology at the beginning, and one of our things that we said was we wanted people to reflect on like where they've come from and where they're going. And I think that's a really nice idea, like reflecting on the past and where you're at now. That's really nice. So obviously a big thing this year has been like the student experience during the pandemic and things. So I was wondering how maybe your experience as a student, and I think are you doing an MA in creative writing as well?
Yeah.
So I was wondering how your experience in all of this has like impacted your writing.
I think at first lockdown put me in such a rut because I was finishing my undergrad right at the start of lockdown. So I was doing my dissertation in lockdown, which wasn't great. So like lockdown number one took me out of it so much. But then I think getting really into poetry and writing again, especially when masters started, got me then spending every single subsequent lockdown, however many there've been, wanting to better my own work, inspired by everything I've been reading on my course and from recommendations from people on my course. So I think that's kind of shaped both my fiction and my poetry to try things I hadn't done before. And I think that's what lockdown's done for so many people, is giving them the time to try things they hadn't. So for me as a writer, that's how it's impacted, is having the chance to actually experiment with my own things.
Yeah, I think that's really nice, because it's like that idea of spinning a negative into a positive. And I think it's really nice you've got something out of the past year. I think a lot of people have had that same experience. It was like this crazy thing that you like fell into, but you just have to roll with it. So that's really nice. And was there any particular reason that you decided to submit to the York Literary Review this year?
Again, to kind of echo what people have said, it's the northernness of it, and actually getting something that's like for us, because so many publishing houses and things are very London based, and we can be forgotten about up here in the lonely old cold northern. So I think getting to be published among so many other northern writers, to share our own northern experiences based on our lives and our like backgrounds and places we've been in our own, like Whitby and our own northern landscape, was something that I really wanted to contribute to, along with all the other writers doing similar things.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it quite a bit, but yeah, we really wanted to highlight the work of northern writers. So we were really happy, especially like you're a member of York St John. It was just really nice, like, and your piece was just brilliant. So like I've said, you were the only piece that we had submitted that we didn't have any suggestions for to make changes. We just loved it, which is obviously testament to your writing. But I was just wondering if you have any advice for writers like hoping to get their work published.
Write everything, anything that you have in your mind, just write it, whether you think it's going to be good or bad, just do it. And then edit so much. Like that's something I didn't used to do, but then I've recently got into such a swing of editing down as much as you can, and then submitting to everything, because what is there to lose? You might as well, because you never know who's going to accept you, so might as well publish to submit to everywhere you can.
Well, thank you very much. So I think now would be a good time to open up to a Q&A discussion with all the panelists. We just want to remind everyone that you can still send in questions through the Q&A function. And yeah, I think everyone's cameras are going to start coming back on, and we'll open up for a Q&A.
I'm back. So the way the Q&A will work, Lily, who has been monitoring the Q&A this whole time, will let us know if there's any questions, and bear in mind you can still send in questions now. You don't have to wait for any time. We'll spot all of them, and we're very interested to see what people have to ask. So welcome to Lily. A voice from the sky will appear. Have you received any questions?
Yeah, hi everyone. So the first question we've got is actually directed at Rob, who's been the coordinator of the MA Publishing course. And the question's, Rob, how do you feel about the MA Publishing students reviving this anthology?
Yeah, hi, thanks for the question. Yeah, well, it's been a fantastic experience. I hope the four people that have been in charge of the event today agree with me, but it's been a really fantastic experience. It's the first cohort of the new MA Publishing program at York St John. So just to give a bit of context, this is all done for a module on the program. It's a group publishing project, and the group decided that they wanted to revive the York Literary Review, which they knew had been done by staff and students at St John's back in 2018 was the most recent edition. So they were really keen to revive it, and that's exactly what they did. They rebranded it. They treated it very much as a professional exercise, a small indie press. They dealt with the submissions. Well, in fact, they got the submissions, so they did the commissioning side of it first of all, got the submissions in, the editorial, the design process, and just treated it very much as and it is a real life publishing project. So it's been a really fascinating experience for me facilitating it, seeing the four of them go through the process, developing their skills, and the result is on its way. It's going to print tomorrow. So very soon they'll have that book in their hands, and so will the contributors, and everyone that's in the anthology will get their copy as well. And the completion of the project will be there, and hopefully they'll feel very happy about it all. So yeah, and the reviving's been met with very positive response from the university and the creative writing, the York Centre for Writing team. You know, of course, they're very pleased that it's back on the agenda, and it's up to the publishing students next year on the cohort where they want to continue with the review, and hopefully they will. The team this year have certainly revived it to a really high standard, and maybe that's a point for Jamie to perhaps come in as well. But I feel it's a really high standard. It's a really good publication. So hopefully the cohort next year will want to continue with the review as well. Jamie, I don't know if you wanted to say something in response to
that. In response to what your comments, Rob?
Yeah.
I would say the quality is, it couldn't have been higher if a team of people who worked in publishing for a decade and sort of sweated over the submissions for months, I would say. Editorially couldn't have been better, I would say. That's fine. Was that the...
Thanks, Jamie. Next question.
Yeah, thank you. And we obviously, as a team, and I'm sure the writers are also very happy to hear that. Lily, is there any other questions?
Yeah, so Anna's got a question for the editorial team, just asking, how did lockdown and COVID affect how we went about organising and publishing the anthology?
I'll pass that on to Amy if you'd like to give an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, we conducted most of the meetings online over Microsoft Teams because you had to. We couldn't go on campus. Recently, we've been able to meet face to face, which has been really nice. So through the typesetting process, we had to be on campus to use the software. So that was really nice. That was our first time all meeting really in person, which was really wild. But yeah, the whole nature of everything being online wasn't too much of a hindrance. We all worked really well as a team, and then all the submissions we worked out a system of doing it online, and it went pretty smooth. But it has been lovely working in person for the last part of it, and next year's team will be lucky they'll get to work in person the whole time. Yeah, the process, I don't think it was hindered really by the nature of it all being online. We did what we could with it.
Yeah, I think it really helped us appreciate the value of a group chat. I think never before have we appreciated being able to send a message and have immediate responses while we were all trapped in our singular rooms. But I'll pass that back to Lily if there's another question.
Yes, we've got a question for our authors, just asking were there any positives to writing during a pandemic?
Oh, Victoria, would you like to take this?
If there are any positives writing in the pandemic, For me personally, one of the positives that I found, I mean, a lot of people I think felt like they had perhaps more time to write. I was homeschooling my kids as well as working, so I'm not sure that was true for me. But one thing I did find is because we were locked down and we weren't traveling, I was doing a lot more walking locally. And for me, I never really wrote nature poetry, but I've noticed a lot of things, the subtle changes in nature a lot more. And I think a lot of people have found some solace in that. Like even, I know it sounds like really small things, like finding a new walk to go on, or like I taught my kids the name of the wildflowers, and it sounds really unexciting, but I think in the time of lockdown, these sort of small things can like people experimented with their cooking, didn't they? And I think somebody, I think it was Indy, said that we've become more experimental, and I sort of feel a bit the same, that you feel a bit more like, do you know what, we're living through something really significant here, and I want to be a bit more experimental. I want to take a few more risks with my writing, and I've started writing in perhaps in forms that I hadn't written in before. So I think maybe new subjects, new forms, having a bit more time, all of those things have impacted on the way people have written in COVID, and also maybe focusing on those little things close to home that maybe we just didn't, our vision was so much wider, wasn't it? Whereas now our vision's more focused on the smaller things that we're taking solace in.
Yeah, completely agree and feel all of that. Sarah, do
Yeah.
you feel like you felt any positives from writing like in this time?
I mean, initially I didn't. Initially I found it, all the things I would normally do to write kind of disappeared. So I always say I like to take ideas out for a cup of tea or something. You know, I would go and sit in a coffee shop or go and talk to other people about it. But what it has done is it's forced me to realise what kind of writer I am. And I've been quite hard on myself over the years of trying to, you know, people say you must write every day and you must do this and you must do that. And I've been able to accept what kind of writer I am, and that I do need some outside influences, but I write quite sporadically. I don't write every day. I like to still take ideas on a walk, and I've been able to adapt what I do. And like Victoria, I live in a rural village now, so I've been able to just go out where there's nobody and sit with my ideas. So it's kind of cemented who I am as a writer and how I write and how I work. And yet, no, it has been super positive, although at the beginning it was really unproductive. At the very beginning of lockdown, I had a commission to finish. In the first month, I had to try and finish the commission. And it's like the hardest thing I've ever written. But it was brilliant getting it done. I thought, oh, I can actually do this, you know. And like Victoria, a lot of people said, you've got time to finish your novel. And I was like, but my head doesn't want to finish the novel, you know. So battling with all of those outside voices, I've kind of been able to overcome that and settle into my own writing routine and kind of what I do and who I am. So positive in that way for me, yeah.
That's great. It is great to hear that there has been, although we've all gone through a bit of a weird experience, that there has been positives to come out of it. And I wonder, Beth, do you feel that you've had the same experience or not?
I can totally relate to what Vicky and Sarah both said there, in terms of like Sarah said, kind of about accepting like how you write and who you are as a writer. Well, I don't know that it's necessarily to do with the pandemic, but just kind of maybe having the time to think about it and accepting that even if you did have a bit of extra time, I'm still not somebody who's going to sit down and write 1,000 words a day. Like, it's just not it's just not how I operate. No matter how many times I sign up to, like, you know, these write 1,000 words a day for 2 weeks or whatever, I sign up to all these things and I just never do it. So just accepting, you know, that your process is your process, and that's fine. You know, it doesn't have to be the same as anybody else's. And I suppose specific to kind of the last few months or whatever, definitely the walking is something that's really kind of played a part now in my writing process. Similar to Vicky, like, I was working from home and I had kids and I was homeschooling and whatnot, so kind of was under pressure time-wise, but always made time to get out for the hours walk every day. And on the walk, like, just that constant thing of your mind you've got a bit of headspace then, and your mind is just playing over all these different ideas, and you're out walking, got your phone with you and putting your notes in the note app on your phone to make sure that you don't forget what it was you were thinking of by the time you get back home.
Well, I think, as you've all mentioned, nature has definitely played into your writing and how, you know, it's changed your perspective, whether it is walking and seeing nature changing or actually getting outside more than you might have in normal times. And we found when we were putting the anthology together and how we should do the theming for the designs, we found we were drawn to images of nature. All of our social media posts, we found ourselves like incorporating images of flowers and branches. And as you'll find out very soon, and maybe if you sneak peek on the pre-order website to see our cover, we've incorporated a tree stump into that to not only reflect the idea of memories and the way that trees remember, well, they have the memory rings, that nature is also so important to us now, having gone through this pandemic and not being able to have a normal everyday life. And I've seen that some more questions have come through. So Lily, would you like to highlight any others?
Yeah, so we've had a question about you've mentioned that we tried to highlight Northern writers with the review this year, but the question is, did we end up having a diverse range of voices, and if so, how did we balance this in terms of representation?
Amy, would you like to give an answer to that?
Yeah, and we got submissions from like literally all over the world. I think we've got someone from Australia in the final anthology. We didn't really like specifically go out of our way to say like we were just going to have like 90% Northern writers or anything like that. We did like keep a track of it, but it just so happened that a lot of the pieces we picked for the final anthology ended up being Northern writers. We didn't like specifically like say, oh, we're not having that person because they're from the south. It just so happened, and I think it's a testament to like the work of Northern writers particularly, and I just think it's really nice. But yeah, we do have there's quite a range of people featured in it. So yeah, there's a lot of voices.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of voices. And when we did have our final list of our choices, we did consider the thoughts of diversity. We didn't want, if we were, you know, going on about giving smaller writers or a voice, we didn't want to only be giving a certain portion of a community a voice. So we have pieces from people from, as you said, Australia all the way back to here, but we also have pieces from people from the LGBTQ plus community. We have topics that discuss more than just, you know, the everyday normal things. We have such a huge variety of who our writers are and what they're writing about. It's definitely an anthology that not only is the writing diverse, the people are as well. And that was something, although we weren't looking for it, we're very happy it happened in the end. So Lily, is there another question?
Yeah, and we also have a question, again, directed to our authors. How do you feel the future of Northern publishing, how do you feel about the future of Northern publishing and the part that they play is impacted by being a part of the York Literary Review?
I think this would be a great question for Indy to answer as a Northern writer in the book.
So I think, like I touched on before, there are so many London-centred things, but I feel like the more I'm looking into it nowadays, like with York Literary Review and other ones I've seen around, like with people like Valley Press, there are so many more Northern opportunities now than I think there ever have been, from my knowledge. And I think it's allowing us to sort of gain that platform and say, like, we are here too, we write, our stuff is just as good as yours in the South, so please listen to us. And I think our voices are slowly becoming more prevalent in the sort of, at least UK writing scene. Can't speak as much for other places, but I think we are definitely getting more attention against like Southern writers than we ever have done. So, and like places like the York Literary Review are a massive factor in that a lot of people are now going to be hearing our voices more than they did before.
Mhm. And that's definitely something on the MA publishing course that was highlighted. We were very much taught and encouraged to know more about independent publishing, and especially Northern publishing. I wonder if Jamie would like to pipe up a little bit about Valley Press and their position within Northern publishing.
Yes. Valley Press and our position within Northern publishing. Well, I'll tell you what, we're still quite, even for a Northern publisher, we're quite provincial, I would say, because there's a real Northern publishing hub developing now in Manchester, with some offshoots in Liverpool, and there's some in Newcastle as well. You could gather together a meeting of Northern publishers in Manchester or Newcastle and have have at least sort of 6 or 8 seats filled. But in North Yorkshire, we're still getting up and going. Except of course, even 40 miles away from York, here in Scarborough. Yeah, that's our position geographically. Anyone got a sort of interim question, or would you like me to shut up now?
Definitely, no, we do not want you to shut up about it.
Are you sure?
I mean, it's I think interesting for not only us as students and writers in the anthology, but for the audience to know that publishing is more than just the big publishing houses that everyone's familiar with in London. It is, publishing is anything else that you want it to be. If you put a piece of writing out there in the world, it's publishing. A guerrilla magazine is publishing, and publishing is changing all the time. And I think that's something that being based in the North is really helping. And I wonder if Rob has something he wants to add to that, because I can see you nodding.
Well, yeah, I am nodding along quite a lot to what everyone's saying, and I think I don't think Jamie's giving himself enough credit. I think, I mean, he might be provincial in the sense of being kind of away from a hub, perhaps out in Scarborough, but I certainly think that the work that Valley Press is doing is very strong indeed. There's some fantastic books coming out. I mean, not only, of course, stuff like the literary review and the work that he's doing with students, but the recent book that Valley put together of eco poetry. Is it imminent, Jamie? Is it out? I can't remember if it's out yet.
It's out before this one. Yeah, it's out in July.
Yeah,
so it's next to it on the website. If anyone wants to.
It's a very important anthology, I would argue, of a very important subject. So I do think that Jamie's perhaps not bigging himself up as much as he should. It's
difficult, Rob. Edited by a York editor, I should say. The Anthology.
Yes, yeah,
the problem is I need like a night's sleep between being asked the question and giving a good answer. I can't do it like this.
And I think there's some great publishers in the North doing some wonderful stuff, Valley Press included. People like Blood Axe in Newcastle, Dead Ink, and Other Stories in Sheffield. There's some amazing publishers producing some really interesting work. And all this conversation we've had around voices, they are tapping into voices that ordinarily might not get put out there. So I think Northern publishers are on the rise for a reason, and independent publishers have that freedom perhaps to take a bit more risk, and I think that's really important. So that would be my response.
Lily, is there another question I've seen has popped up?
Yeah, so we have another question for the review team, which is, was the experience of hands-on real-life publishing enjoyable?
That's a very good question. I'll let Amy, would you like to start off again?
Yeah, it was very enjoyable. It's been a really, really good experience, because I don't think I'd have gotten the opportunity to do this, at least not now, had I not done the course. So it's been amazing. I can't wait to hold the book. I think that's what we're all excited for, is to hold the book in our hands.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm wondering how maybe I'll let Sarah start this off. I wonder how you felt being in this different kind of publishing experience, not really having that face-to-face in-person experience. That all of our communications with you have been completely online through emails. So I'm wondering how you found that different to normal publishing.
I'll be honest, this is kind of how all my work's been published, more or less, by me submitting to online calls and communication being like that. I think geographically, being based where I am, I'm almost in Scotland. So I'm very reluctant to go places because everywhere's really far. But apart from the relationships I've built locally with places like Hexham Book Festival and bookshops, the majority of things I've done have been like this. So I've found it great, really. I love being able to do this. I love being able to be where I am. And that's what's been a massive benefit of lockdown for me, is people much more open to engaging digitally. And it really just opens up how we can communicate. You know, being able to do this digitally is great. If I'd had to come down to York, there's a chance I wouldn't have been able to afford it maybe. So this has opened up this opportunity for me in particularly, and I know that's why lots of people who I work with in my community were really keen to submit as well, because they knew that there would be no barriers, if you know what I mean. So in terms of that, it's kind of barrier free, because there was no submission fee. That was another brilliant thing. That's something that I advocate for quite a lot. So yeah, it's been a great experience. Thank you.
Indy, I wonder, as a student, how have you found the publishing experience?
So yeah, I heard about this through a uni course, through Rob telling us about it, as well as another one, which was the Beyond the Walls one, which was just for uni students. So this was like such a different, scarier experience than the Beyond the Walls, because it was open to so many more people outside of the uni perspective that I've been used to. But like Sarah's saying, I've also been submitting to like various places online. So every publishing opportunity I've had has been through online calls. So I think that doing them through uni gives so much, shines so much of a light on those students who maybe don't have as much experience in writing, or at least in being published, as older writers, more experienced writers. But also just the whole online aspect, allowing it to be accessible for anybody as well. I think both of those hand in hand worked so well for this particular anthology.
That's great. And I think we have time for one more question. So Lily, is there anything else?
Yes, there's a question from Daniel that go about how we went about ordering and balancing the anthology. So how did we decide to space out poems or put short pieces alongside longer ones? Because I know there was a few conversations about that.
So when we were putting, we think there's going to be a really complex answer to this, and I wish there was. We really thought about it. We tried to see if we could separate it, poems and then fiction pieces and non-fiction pieces, but that didn't work. We tried to have it so that, you know, there was a theme that was traveling through, but it didn't seem to work. And I believe it was Lily on our team who may have just said, shall we put it alphabetically and just see how it works? And we were like, oh, is that the lazy way out? But we put it in alphabetical order and it just seemed to work perfectly. It seemed to balance out so nicely. So although it was an easy way of going about it, it actually worked out the best way. And I have spotted one more question's come through, so we have just enough time for the very, very last one. Lily, what does it say?
Yes, so it's just about how much contact or input did Jamie have with us throughout the process?
Jamie, would you like to answer?
So it was how much contact did I have? Well, it's not as much as last time, and yeah. So the main thing I did was the big 2-hour session where I donned my shield, my plastic shield, for the first time, and braved it in the Mac Lab, I think it's known, in York St John's, and we all and we started with just like the Microsoft Word file, and we ended up with almost the bare bone, the skeleton of a typeset book, which I think you then sort of couldn't say, but it was the education that mattered. So that was my that's been my main memory from this. And apart from that, it's just been tidying up the files. I really trusted the student team and Rob to deliver a book that was worthy of the Vianney Press logo, as they always do. I'm very proud to have it on the site.
Well, we are absolutely thrilled to hear that. And with that, Amy, would you like to take us out of this?
Yeah, so as we're coming to an end, we just want to thank a few people. So firstly, all the readers, you did a really good job, and it was really nice to hear all your stories. We also wanted to thank all the contributors. I know some of them have been able to attend and some of them haven't tonight. But if you do pick up the anthology by pre-ordering it, you'll see that there's just a really, really wonderful array of stories that we couldn't share them all tonight, but like it's a brilliant book. And we wanted to thank Jamie for helping our vision to come to life. And we're really excited, like I said, to get the book and hold it in our hands. And we wanted to thank Rob for all of his guidance throughout the entire process, because we really couldn't have done it without him.